So George, let's try and set the scale of what Fullscreen does in the sense of, let's say that a great cable show like Mad Men could have an audience of 2 to 2.5 million people a week. Mm-hmm. So give me an idea of what some of the viewership of a Fullscreen video might be like.
Well, it definitely can vary, right? But we're really invested in working with the next generation of talent that are building their homes on social platforms and video platforms like YouTube. And the scale has gotten pretty enormous. We're working with tens of thousands of creators now. And at the top end, some of the individuals that are producing content are reaching a scale of between 50 and 100 million video views on a monthly basis. That's one person typically.
One person, 50 million to 100 million views.
And then so Fullscreen in aggregate, is on YouTube about 6 billion video views per month. All original programming from creative people living in LA, New York, but all around the world really is the beautiful thing.
So do you feel like your job is to build kind of a new kind of star?
Yeah, we really think of ourselves in the talent development business. We're very serious about creators. There are a lot of different companies and reasons to work with creative people, but we take the talent development aspect of that very seriously. We have this little soundbite we like to say, we're in the business of developing creators from start to stardom. And when I started the company 5 years ago, we thought of the talent as the next generation of X, the next generation of Y. And now we actually kind of stopped saying that because a lot of the top talent, they are the stars and voices of today. So it's akin almost to a record label 10, 20 years ago where they had maybe an A&R department and guys were scouting talent in clubs and things like that. And we're doing that online at a large scale.
Okay, so we're going to show a little clip. Can we roll the video?
Inside my sheets with the screen lighting up my face, I got my life laid out in a visual space. See, in the real world, these brows are not on fleek. Wing liner ain't so easy, my look is pretty weak. Okay, so when I first started YouTube, I had fallen in love with comedy videos. I'd fallen in love with the channels that got to do music videos and parody videos and sketches, and yet I did beauty videos. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm a girl, which means I put on dresses and I go shopping and I like to wear makeup. But if I had to define myself as something, it definitely wouldn't be a fashion beauty expert because, I don't have it all together. I can't even do a smoky eye. I wanted to make something on my channel that I had grown up falling in love with, seeing other channels get to do. Finally, after a few months of working on this, I got to make my dream come true and make a video on this channel that is for everybody and not just the DIYer. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video.
A big part of the video game Assassin's Creed, it takes places on the streets where there's lots and lots of people, and right now there's not a lot of people where we're at. So we're going to seatbelt on, please. He will be running through the people, dodging through the people, and the camera will be right part of that whole action. So we're going right now to where the people are. So to make this game feel the most lifelike, we don't get permits. We're not blocking the whole streets off. We're not getting actors. We want this to feel legit. And the whole thing with Assassin's Creed is the guy's running through trying to get away. So we're trying to create the same kind of hysteria.
So you want me to tell you what we were seeing there? Okay.
Yeah.
So what we're showing there in that clip are two personalities. The first one is Ava Gutowski, aka My Life is Ava, who's actually the fastest rising female lifestyle creator on YouTube today, arguably on the internet. She speaks to millions of young people, and as you saw, it's very personal, right? We added that clip of the video blog at the end because there's always this direct connection to the fan base, whether that's happening on YouTube, on Twitter, on any social platform, really. And then the other example is Devin Supertramp, who's really one of the finest examples of the kind of high-quality, low-cost revolution that's happened in production. He makes incredible, epic videos of people jumping out of planes and landing on jet skis. And just as you saw in that clip, every video that he makes is accompanied with the behind-the-scenes kind of making of, because he always wants to bring it back to that personal level. And the creators who focus on that personal connection are the ones that are always the most successful.
Okay, so Fullscreen started out as just a YouTube, using YouTube as your distribution platform.
Yeah.
And it's, needless to say, changing. And can you talk a little bit about the role of YouTube and why maybe you're going to move some of your content away from YouTube into other platforms?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. We started out on YouTube because we saw that there's a new generation of creators who were using YouTube and the internet really to create their channels and establish their voice and build an audience. Before I founded the company, I was actually an executive at YouTube, and I would spend some time in Madison Avenue, and I would try to speak to advertisers about the next generation of talent and how they had this deep connection with fans, and I would get laughed out of rooms. And then I would spend time in LA with studios and networks and agencies and talk about this creative group of talent that's rising on YouTube, and I would get laughed out of rooms. And I felt there was a little bit of a knowledge gap happening. So we started Fullscreen with the mission to empower creators. And that's really always been the case and always will. The reality is that the social web today only allows a certain production type to be economically feasible. Producing features, producing long-form content is often really difficult to do without the direct support of an advertising sponsor. So you often see talent that have ambitions. Some of them want to be great storytellers. Some of them want to be stars. And they don't necessarily have the financial means or the production means to pull those things off. And more importantly, distributing them on the social web is not necessarily the best idea. So we come in, we finance a lot of projects, we co-produce a lot of projects with the talent, and we'll distribute them on all the platforms where it makes sense, whether that's direct-to-consumer on iTunes or Google Play. We have our own subscription initiatives underway. One is live, one is coming. And we really think that YouTube and the social web are where you build audience and where you find your voice. And it's not actually about taking talent off of those platforms. That's one thing that a lot of people maybe misunderstand. It's actually about making them as successful as they can on those platforms, because that's where you actually engage the audience. But as of right now, in terms of larger productions, we look elsewhere for those kind of things.
So, I mean, to take it to a basic level, the economics of advertising-based YouTube production are not enough to support the kind of stuff that you'd like to do in your more ambitious.
Sometimes. It's really kind of fascinating because creativity loves constraint, right?
Right.
And so there's an economic model on YouTube which is based on an advertising revenue share, which I actually helped build while I was at YouTube. And the creators who can build some audience, in the tens of thousands of subscribers and up, in the millions of views, start to go from that sort of hobbyist to semi-professional stage, which is really cool. And we actually like to celebrate at Fullscreen when they go from semi-pro to pro, which is basically where they say, this is my career now, right? And that's a really, really cool thing. But it's typically based on lots of output, so many videos produced all the time at an extremely low cost. It sounds great if you produce something that gets 1 million views. We'd all be really proud of that, right? But the reality is that that's worth low thousands of dollars, right? So if you're spending more than low thousands of dollars to get that 1 million views, you could be underwater. So that's why you see a lot of formats that are based on video blogging, or I'm sure you've all heard of people playing video games as a way to connect with an audience. But then you get some sort of amazing things like Devin Supertramp, who we saw, or the Fine Brothers, who make a series called Kids React, which is really one of the most popular series on the internet. And they do it at an extremely low cost, at an extremely high degree of output, and it works for them. But then they have this audience that's hungry to see them do more, and that's when oftentimes financing and production kicks in.
Right. So where does that take you? And so you develop a Devin Supertramp. How do you now take it to the next level through either SVOD or iTunes or other places, can you just now do something with that talent and take it to the next level?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing that's important to understand is if you think of the spectrum of creators who make stuff online, at least as a serious hobby or as a profession, it's really sort of the wrong move to assume that all of them want to be celebrities or actors. And in LA, that's often the default assumption, right? I actually think of it in maybe 3 sections. You do get the creators that want to be stars, want to be voices, want to be hosts, personalities. But then you get the ones that want to be entrepreneurs, right? Ava is an entrepreneur. She has multiple merchandising lines. She has a sunglasses line. We had her on a national tour this summer. And while Devin is actually a filmmaker who speaks to his audience, but he's actually not a personality in the star sense. And then the third bucket, in case you're curious, are just the kind of internet hustlers that are always finding a way to make a buck online. And they exist too, as we all know. But, when it comes to where do we go next, and especially when it's about premium content and storytelling, there are probably 50 plus outlets now to develop and sell programming to. We found increasingly that we want to take matters into our own hands. We own a brand and a studio that's based in Austin, Texas called Rooster Teeth. Rooster Teeth to me is probably the strongest example in the sort of internet media era of a brand that's also a studio, that's also a talent system with a real passionate fan base. Now there's a difference between an audience and a fan base, right? A fan base is a community. If you throw a party, they're going to show up to your party, right?
Right.
And Rooster Teeth, we've launched our own subscription video platform, which went live this year. It's doing incredibly well. It's actually in the top 10 already of all SVOD platforms in the US. And it's driven by this passionate fan base who wants content from the world of Rooster Teeth, which is sort of like if Comedy Central and your Xbox kind of had a baby, that's the Rooster Teeth brand. And then Fullscreen is also in the process of launching a service, which we hope will be along the lines of an HBO Now for young adults. And that's due early next year.
Great. So we're going to take some questions, but Dean Wilson and I were just in China 2 weeks ago, and 80% of the people in China who consume web content do it on a device like this.
Yeah.
So where does a company like Fullscreen play in the short form, maybe serialized content specifically aimed at a mobile device?
Yeah, well, I'll give you some numbers. So we were founded in 2011. In that year, 7% of our viewership occurred on mobile devices and tablets. 7. Today, 80% in the United States is consumed on mobile devices and tablets. So it definitely is a mobile-first mentality. That does oftentimes impact what you shoot and how you frame things, often much closer. But I think right now...
Does it have impact on the way you tell a story, too?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we think there's a time and place for short-form content. That's, the snackable type stuff that we all see in our Facebook feeds and on YouTube and Twitter and places like that. However, we produced a series called Summer Break, and it's... you're all familiar with The Real World from MTV. If you sort of hit reset on that and did it on social media, that's what Summer Break is. Cool California teens in their year between high school and college deciding what to do next. It's in its 3rd season. And when we initially created that show, which we actually did in partnership with AT&T, we were like, it's going to be snackable, it's going to be fast, it's going to be always on. And there is that element. But what we found is the fans actually did want that episode. That's that 16-minute episode that on Friday after school they can, I don't know if you call that lean back viewing per se, but longer form in nature. Mm-hmm. And so the audience does have that attention span. It's not only about short form, it's not only about long form, just about making a connection, I would say.
Okay, we got time for some questions. Anybody have a question? Yeah.
Sure. I'm David Craig. I'm a professor at USC Annenberg. I've been doing some research on social media entertainment, and you've described the different types of content creators. Could you speak a little more about content and this whole leaning back process? Because we tend to conflate content with highly scripted, high production value, but so much of the production value of what we see in the space is more communal. It's more about hanging out and spending time with people that you actually like being with, not necessarily be taken on a journey or some sort of experience or an escape, so much as it's just kind of communion. Could you speak more to that and how you've been able to monetize and find value in that particular process?
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right in that it is about that connection. Without that, you can't be as successful as a digital creator. You just can't. And, YPulse, a research firm, did a study which we thought was fascinating. And it interviewed about 2,500 millennials and young adults. And it said, are online celebrities your friends? And about 56% of that audience said yes. And then they asked the same question about TV stars and film stars, and the answer was about 6 to 7%. So it's not that one is better than the other, definitely not, but it's that there's this personal relationship which gives you the power to do a lot of amazing stuff. And so we try to coach that a lot at Fullscreen. In particular with music, a lot of musicians come in, they know how to make their video, they know how to write their song, but the act of talking to their audience is maybe a little foreign to them. And they quickly get on board because they realize it almost, not always, but often is a requirement to success.
So are you developing more of this kind of what we used to call A&R, artists and repertoire, a way to help these personalities get better at what they do?
Yes, absolutely. So I mentioned that today we're working with tens of thousands of content creators. So at that scale, a lot of them are in their early stages of finding their voice. They're not necessarily a creative genius on day one, right? And so we build a lot of software tools to help creators when they're small and they're not making a lot of money. And it's more about connecting with each other and an animator finding a musician or an editor finding, a shooter to work with. And so we build software tools to help people get their traction, right? As they start to get that traction, that's when our talent development team really comes in. They set up collaborations, they bring you into studio, they maybe give you some financing to make something. And then at the top, of course, we're talking about real stars with Hollywood agents and the whole nine.
And that's when the problem starts.
No, it's actually quite fun because there's all this new territory, but also some of it's very familiar when you're talking about films, movies, series,
Right.
and things like that.
Great. Thank you, George. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much, John.